Hi, this is Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about the Dragonlance relaunch. And another reason why I think it was absolutely correct to cut Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman out of the relaunch, which is exactly what Wizards of the Coast did. From what I had heard, they didn't even tell them it was coming, right? And I think there's a good reason, and I'm going to talk to you about it right now. This is my humble opinion. Let's go forward. All right. I think Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weis should have been cut out of this labor project because they are past the age of labor. Okay? Dungeons & Dragons is an American product. Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman are both Americans, right? And so once you get to that point, right, you are then talking about American culture and American norms established by the American government. And the American government says that when you're 67, you retire, and they will pay you to do it. They will send you a check. They say your days of labor are over. It is not a responsible action for this nation to ask you to labor anymore. In fact, in many cases, it's considered cruel, right? So the reality is, we have to make a decision as a nation, and Wizards of the Coast and all the Wizards of the Coast employees are Americans, and they are part of this conversation we're having as an American society. And here's the conversation, right? President, U.S. president. Should an 80-year-old person be U.S. president? We're running that experiment, right? I think Biden is 79 right now. He's about to be our first octogenarian president. The experiment is massively failing. It is horrific, the idea of a retired person laboring. It is not working, right? And the ramifications of it are catastrophic. There are Americans increasingly, every single day, there are Americans who are wondering if they're going to be able to buy bread and milk, right? This experiment has failed. And I think as a nation, we need to decide what is true and what is false. Is the 67-year-old retirement age real, right? And we say, hey, once you're at the age of retirement, we are asking you as a culture to retire, right? And so, and because the reality is, putting hard, difficult labor on the backs and the minds of people who science tells us their bodies and their minds are in serious degradation, right? That's what happens with age. Science tells us this. No science currently tells us that someone's mind, human mind and human body improves with age. There is no science that is saying that, right? So when we are taking jobs that are massively complex or massively taxing from an emotional and intellectual perspective and putting them on people that the entire society has said, we must protect these people from labor, and as a society, we're willing to pay billions to protect them from the dangers of labor, right? Then when we hire retired people who are past the age of retirement, Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weis are both well past the age of retirement, to do hard, taxing, emotionally, intellectually taxing work, it is cruel and unwise, and we already know how the experiment ends, right? Gary Gygax, right? Well past the age of retirement, right? That did not end well last year, right? So the reality is, this experiment's run. We know the answer. Wizards of the Coast needs to make a decision, right? And I think Wizards of the Coast, they don't have a special decision of their own. The entire nation, we know the answer. The experiment is run. It is cruel, irresponsible, and foolish. to take people who are past the age of retirement and give them intellectually and emotionally draining, taxing jobs. It is unwise. It is not working out. The decision to do this with President Joseph Biden has been utterly catastrophic, right? And honestly, I think Wizards of the Coast dodged a bullet by not putting Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss on this project. This project is going to be massively emotionally and intellectually taxing. It is going to be challenging, right? And the reality is they need people who are robust in mind and body. And the reality is no science in the world tells us that people past the age of 67 are growing in the burdens they can put upon their intellectual and emotional shoulders. It just, the science, if the world is asking us to look at the science tells us this is bad behavior. When you retire. We as a nation need to be saying retirement is retirement. And the reality is, I don't think there should be no law that would restrict anybody from working past retirement, but every functioning business, in my opinion, needs to say it's important that every functioning tabletop role-playing game business needs to recognize the work done. When you are going to create a product that actually functions, it is going to be emotionally and intellectually taxing, and to place that on somebody who science is telling us that their intellectual capacity is degrading and will never improve, right? Intellectual capacity, intellectual performance does not improve past the age of 67, right? Please point me to any science that says otherwise. But we've reached a point where it is socially irresponsible, in my opinion, to take jobs that are going to be emotionally and intellectually taxing and give them to people who are past the age of retirement. It is just massively unwise. We've run the experiment, we've seen the results. We're not supposed to ignore science, right? And this is ignoring science. So in my opinion, it was 100% correct for Wizards of the Coast to put the burden of this task on people whose minds are ready for it, right? Rather than wondering, is this going to snap, right? Something that is under degradation, that is literally under degradation, right? Like, not because of their particular people, but because science tells us once you're 67, your capacity is going to be reduced sequentially from that point forward. It's just, and that's one of the reasons why we've decided to pay billions of dollars to protect people from labor, right? So if we as a society are choosing to protect people from labor, then I really think it's cruel to put this emotional and intellectual tax on a person who science tells us this isn't wise. And very practical, very real, very immediate evidence is telling us, don't do this, right? Like, it is not a good idea. Not for anyone, not for the person in the position, and certainly not for the people being impacted by the work they do. Like, that's my humble opinion. I know this is a sensitive subject. Is there anything I'm missing? Are you seeing situations where, people well past the age of retirement were put in charge of things and it just worked out great? I'm more willing to look at it. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking, subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.